for the city of Miramichi. More public are reliant on the transit for transportation for their day-to-day use. Those are, and we hear constantly from our ridership that they cannot live without the bus. And if you lived for a day on the phone systems at Transit, you would know that. They need to know that the buses are running. Are they on time? Can I get to work? Can I get to school? Now, with those, of course, the expanded services, the growth of the transit service in Miramichi, and the implementation of our strategic plan are all having an effect on this year's budget moving forward. You can't really have growth without any cost, unfortunately. Our overall requests haven't really changed. We're asking for $60,000 more than we did from 2024, and I'll get into a little bit of that, but the majority of that ask is from the strategic plan and implementing some of those changes. Again, we're going to be continuing our agreement for bus replacement in 2025. There's nothing new there. And part of our strategic plan was to implement an on-demand study. And we're just asking for another $10,000 from the municipality, and then we'll get the rest of that grant hopefully from federal.
Provincial.
Provincial, sorry, yes. A quick look at our revenues. Again, everything continues to grow. Our percentages are staying about the same. So even though we're seeing increased ridership, which then shows increased revenues from passenger fares, there's not quite enough to offset the increased growth, but we do see that continue to climb. Along with the growth, we of course have regular inflation and cost to services, everything from parts to maintenance to, again, fuel. You can see that now. I will say that as I've become more and more familiar with transit over year, the Miramichi Transit specifically year over year, my budgetary expectations are a little bit more on the nose. We're going to see an increase in our advertising revenues again. This is also because of our increased routes and our increased ridership and the new routes. We're getting more of that information out there, so we're seeing some more, a lot more people wanting to advertise with Miramichi Transit. Our charter service stays about the same. We're seeing a year-over-year growth with that. And then, of course, our passenger fares are increasing as well. And as I said, the percentages are staying about the same, right around the 63 to 65% from the city, and everything else is within about 1 or 2% of where it was last year. So even though we're asking for more, everything else is still trying to stay where it was. A couple of notes on those revenues as I talked about. I just want to hit home again. The service times, our new routes, those are all showing huge increases in ridership. We're going to see another record year, and this time I'm hoping to hit our 110 to 115,000 riders a year, and that is a huge benchmark for Miramichi Transit, considering 3 years ago we had about 63,000. We're seeing more access through the city of Miramichi with the new routes, so we're getting a lot of access to places that didn't have access to public transit within the city core. And our new shelters, the new bus stops, and where those buses move allow for some of that advertising growth as well. We're going to be seeing some better locations for advertising on shelters, and the buses themselves will be traveling more throughout the city. Some key points on our expenses for the 2025 year. A couple of big ones, obviously, always salary is our biggest expense. But with the increased routes and the increased service times, of course, that means more drivers have to drive more hours. We are also looking at implementing a part-time driver who will also be responsible for some part-time fleet maintenance. So that's where the office salary part comes in as well, along with the built-in salary raise for all of our employees. The other big increase that you may notice is the advertising. And again, that is because of the new routes and the new hours. We have to make sure that the public know about that, so we have to advertise and let them know, hey, the routes have changed, don't see the old ones, we've got to make those changes, and we have to make sure that people have that information on hand. Excuse me. And while those costs of maintenance continue to increase, earlier this year we had addressed the city with increasing our fleet size. What this allows us to do is maintain that level of service while doing a more robust preemptive maintenance cycle with our buses. So we're not reactively fixing things that are ended up being broken bigger. We can keep those costs down with a bigger fleet, actually. The good thing about this is it doesn't actually require us to buy any new buses. We maintain the same bus increase schedule. We just retire them later. Of course, the cost of living increase for all of our employees, 2% is built in. And while the bus fuel cost continues to increase a little bit, it is leveling out. There will be still a little bit of increase from what I'm being told, but we hope to see that stabilize in the next year or so. And then, of course, the major part of it is our implementation of the strategic plan to continue to grow. That's where the majority of our expenses increase for 2025. I am more than happy to address any questions you may have.
Thanks, Mr. Babineau. So we will open the floor to questions or comments from members of council, starting with Councillor King.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Babineau, for your report. Just a question I have is on your bus. There's a lot of phone. I got a lot of phone calls from people that you change the routes, and it takes a long time now for people to get home. Now, I don't know what the reason is behind that. They're wondering why the bus schedule was changed.
So we get a fair amount of those questions, as I know you guys have forwarded some of those to us as well. We handle them as best as we can on a case-by-case basis. A lot of it seems to be just change of confusion. The routes haven't changed in Miramichi for quite a while, and people are just used to the way that they get from one place to the other. Since we've straightened them out, we've seen those calls drop way off. We might get one or two a week with just some concerns on how to get where they're going. With the new routes, they're actually faster. We have, one of our routes actually has a bus at every stop every 35 minutes as opposed to every 60 minutes before. And the other route still continues every hour. So there's no change on one of the routes, and the other route is actually faster. Where some of the confusion is how do I get that? How do I do there? So what they were doing is they were looking, okay, I have to get from where I live to where I want to go, and I look at the new schedule, and it looks like it's taking me 70 minutes. But they're missing the fact that there's 2 buses on that route, and those buses go by every 35 minutes. And once they're kind of showing that and they explained how those routes have changed, they're usually pretty happy with those changes as well. And we have, further to that point, it's definitely growing pains for all of us, and we listen to all of the concerns of our riders, and the valid ones where we could make those changes to help make those improvements, we have done so. Those finalized routes will be out and printed within the next 2 weeks. So we've listened to some of the changes, and we said, you know what, you're right. We don't go here anymore, and we can make that change to make it without making any major changes to the route. We can adjust that accordingly, and we've let them know that. And the buses are currently doing those new routes. We just have to update the actual documentation showing that.
On your, if I may, Your Worship?
Yeah.
Thank you for that. On your routes, do your bus carry any information on that issue, like the time limit?
Our buses all have...
That they can pass to the passengers?
Yeah, our buses all have copies of our printed routes available for passengers to take on the buses.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, just to build on that, Councillor King,
Yes.
so building on what Jason is saying, like when we, or they, I'm one of the board members representing us, but when the new routes were launched,
Yes.
there were some feedback, as we all received as well, and so Jason has incorporated some of the feedback into those routes, meaning they've been adjusted from when they were first launched to address some of those concerns,
Okay.
like getting to Superstore in Chatham is one I heard about. I don't know if you heard
Yeah.
that one too.
Yeah.
But now he's gone through about a month of taking feedback and improving the routes based on that feedback. He told us last night at the board meeting, within a couple of weeks, then those are all going to be finished and finalized. So they didn't print new maps of the new routes because they knew that they'd make adjustments to make them as good as possible. But that period is going to be over now in a couple of weeks. So we'll have updated maps and schedules that will be able to be circulated on social media, on the buses, on all of the bus stops. So we're just in that period of transition, but that is all going to come out. And Jason, if you want to speak to that further, but that is what you told us last night, right?
Yes, 100% correct,
Yeah.
Mayor Lorden. Yeah, and we kind of knew that. I mean, the new routes have not even been in place for 2 months quite yet. We started September 2nd is when the new routes came into existence. So, and we knew that there was going to be growing pains and there's a big difference between how something looks on paper and practicality, and we know we would have to put them in place first before we can really see where some of those pain points were. And now that we know where they are, we've taken those considerations into the changes we're affecting.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, and thanks for the update.
Of course.
Thanks, Councillor King. Councillor Harris?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Babbio, thanks for the update tonight for the budget for 2025. Just, can you go through your fares, what we charge, what you guys charge?
Of course. So right now we charge, excuse me, for a single ride to get on the bus is $3. And that you can get on that ride and have a transfer anytime within 2 hours of getting on the bus. So if you get on the bus and have to quickly get off somewhere and take a different bus to get to a further destination, that transit pass will cover, or that fare will cover you for that entire ride. So $3 to basically get anywhere in the city, and then of course $3 to get back. Now we offer discounted passes on books of tickets and monthly passes, and then those monthly passes also change depending if you're a senior or a student. The question of fares and whether they would increase is a very hot topic. Right now, we are on par with every other city, major or minor, in Canada. And if we were to raise our fares even 25 cents, we would have the highest bus fares in Canada. So we're trying to be as competitive as we can to keep it, cost effective for people. And there's lots of little ways to get around that. Like I said, we try and keep the monthly passes or the larger books of tickets. If you're someone who's going to ride the bus consistently, we want to give you a break and make that as affordable as possible.
Yeah, no, you are right on par with the rest of them. I just checked New Brunswick earlier today just to see. I'm just looking at the numbers. Like this year, if you keep your going at 20% a month, you should have about 130,000 individual.
I aimed last year for 110 and we came just shy.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say 130.
No, I don't want
to
say.
jinx it.
I'm just going through numbers here. That's just
Yeah,
what
no.
I seem to do during the day. So I look at it at 130. At 130 times $3 is not $155,000 in fares. So how we break that down. Like I know the books are
Right.
a little
So
bit last fight. That's kind of what I wanted for the public understands, because if anyone's looking at numbers at 130,000 riders and we're bringing in 155,000, it doesn't add up at $3. So just as long as we have that out there for the public, because it is taxpayers' money we're looking at.
100%. And yeah, and that is because fares are calculated with a formula that's put out by the Canadian Urban Transit Association, and some of that is based on monthly passes. So they say if you sell a monthly pass, while we want you to keep track of how many times that pass is used if you can, there is a formula that says, hey, if you buy a monthly pass, that assumes that a rider is going to ride that bus X number of times through the month, and that's how you calculate your ridership. So that's why some of those numbers are a little different than actual monetary value.
Just to add on to that too, Councillor Harris, those numbers are used to determine the federal funding allotments for us. So while there might be a little confusion in terms of cash fares, these numbers being higher actually allow us to access more federal funding to help us replace the fleet. Yeah. Is there anything further, Councillor Harris? Yep. Councillor Ross Robinson?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your presentation. Just curious, there's a lot of riders. Are we ever going to get to the point where we're going to need big buses? Like, are the buses full?
Yes. I'm not sure if we will ever get to the point that we will require big buses. It may be baby steps. We may require maybe an extra bus during certain peak hours, which is something, again, that some of the studies we're looking at with our strategic plan will help us answer. We may say, hey, you know what, between the hours of 8 and 10, our buses are full every trip. Let's throw another bus on for 2 hours during the morning, and then that'll help alleviate those peak hours of ridership. And to answer your question, yes, there is one of our routes, excuse me, that goes between Newcastle to Douglastown to Chatham, and both buses for that 70-minute run are full between 7:30 and 8:15.
Yeah, I owe credit to you for that too. I was explaining that to us last night, and instead of having to have a big bus, because you only need it 1 hour a day, having the flexibility of additional small buses allows him to be able to put someone on just for that time needed, and then be able to come back and maybe do a charter or whatever. So appreciate the strategic planning approach, Mr. Babineau. Just a couple of questions from, or Councillor, anything else, Councillor? Yeah. From the chair, I just would want to make the point as well, because we are always comparing ourselves, not just on transit, but all things. And on the revenue overview side, and moving from 63% of the revenue coming from the city subsidy to 65, proposed for 2025, I would just want to make the note that when they did the study, the strategic plan, and it was noted that our city subsidy percentage was the smallest in the province, and the provincial average for the other communities was 66 to 67. So we are still below the provincial average at a 65% city subsidy revenue rate. Really, I guess I wanted to clarify, I know I asked this last night, but I'm asking for the benefit of council and the public. Now that the new routes are going to be finalized, I know part of your plan for next year, Mr. Babineau, is to move some of the shelters, because, some of those places are no longer stops, and there are new areas that will require shelters and stops. Is what the budget presented in front of us, does that include adequate funding to move those shelters as laid out?
Yes, it does.
It does?
Yes.
Perfect. And then this one might actually be more so to the manager, but I know when we received that letter in the summer with the request to allow transit to keep more buses on hand, which you've explained tonight actually will help with keeping costs down as well, preventative maintenance. At the time, we were sort of said, oh, well, we'll look at that during budget as well. I don't know I know you guys met earlier this week too. Like, is that considered an operational matter, or do we have to do a motion to allow them to keep 8 buses instead of 6? Or I guess I never really was clear on how we deal with that request.
I'll take a shot at it. What it basically means is it would be not selling one unit that we would normally sell at the end of its life, and the disposition of the units doesn't require council motions now, so I don't think it would require a council motion not to sell one.
Okay.
If council approves the budget with the clear statement to expand the fleet through keeping a bus, we will keep a bus.
Okay. Because there had been, I think Director McTavish had indicated to the Transit Commission that it was somewhere in a bylaw or a contract that they were only allowed to keep 6 and that was it. So I guess, are we saying that isn't on the books or doesn't have to be adjusted?
I recall some type of expectation or understanding that the number of buses would be 6. I'm not sure where over the years that got set. Perhaps when it was on the city's commitment to replace a bus every year, that it would be, but it would have been then. But I recall that it was an understanding that there would be 6. I don't know if it was a commitment. We can check on that. But I would be surprised if it was a stated commitment. The city is only online for 6 buses.
Okay, so just to confirm, Mr. Manager, so if passing the budget as proposed is also passing an indication that we're okay with them keeping up to 8 buses moving forward?
Yeah,
Okay.
in my mind, it was to try to calculate the costs to maintain those being the older buses. If you keep an older bus, and you want to keep it on the road, the expectation is the service cost for that unit would be high, and I think we were trying to figure out what we would expect. It's not going to be painless. Is it $20,000, $30,000 a year to keep an older bus on? And I think that depends on what you're keeping for a bus. We were told, I think there's no generic number you can count on to say this bus is going to cost you 20,000. It's,
Okay, so then to you, I guess the last comment would be, if we do have some sort of a policy or rule on the books that might need to be adjusted alongside of passing the budget, I'd ask that that be brought back. to
yeah,
council.
it will be. If we need authority of council not to sell a bus we would normally sell, we will bring that back to council.
Okay. And then back to Mr. Babineau, I guess, for clarity as well, because you had mentioned that you forecast, and you know, running the service, that keeping those extra buses would also help with preventing some maintenance as well. But just to confirm that the numbers in front of us account for allowing the transit service to keep 8 buses moving forward rather than 6. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, yes, you are correct. And just to that point, obviously, to the point of maintenance for older buses, that is also taken into account. Obviously, once a bus becomes too costly to keep on the road, if it means that our fleet size has to drop to 7 for a little while, we're not going to take more money than is feasible to keep a bus on the
You're
road.
not going to throw good money after bad.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that is part of having the fleet management plan, so. Okay, thank you, Mr. Babineau, that's all from me. Seeing nothing further, I guess, well, thank you again, and I do want to commend you, Mr. Babineau. I know as our representative, I'm on that board, and it's amazing to see the growth that's happening in the service. I think, you know, we're meaning it's well needed, and the changes that are undergoing are exciting, and I know that you're operating on a shoestring all the time, and it's amazing what you're doing with what you have in terms of resources. So thank you for the good work you're doing, and as it relates to the budget, this will be rolled now into our broader budget process, and as you know, that will be figured out in the next month or so, and we'll let you know.
Thank you again, Your Honor, and honorable councilors. Thank you.